What a great crowd. Thanks for coming out. This is probably one of the most important things that we're facing in our generation, if not our lifetime. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you on a journey through the hydraulic fracturing, the impacts in Colorado from what I've researched and some of which what you already know. But we can get started. We've got a gentleman up in the booth who's going to be running my slides, so we're ready. All right, to just preface this, I'm speaking on behalf of Sierra Club. The source of all of the Colorado oil and gas related information was derived from the COGCC's website. It's public information, and all subsequent documentation per API, per well, is actually found on the state's website. All COGCC data is unredacted and uninterpreted, thus remaining true in its original form, and can be found on the state's website unless otherwise noted. Data compilation was conducted from 2011 to present. Okay, types of observed and recorded oil and gas development impacts in Colorado, not to disclude many others, but here are a few that I'm going to be covering. Soil contamination, ground and surface water contaminations, the impacts, drinking water impacts, aquifer impacts, and well water impacts, vegetation impacts, wildlife habitat, agricultural, air quality degradation, human impacts, and also mechanical failures. What you see here is a state map of Colorado. These are the oil and gas basins that are designated by the COGCC and I believe the USGS. The areas in blue are actual oil and gas basins, so these are your targets. Here's Boulder County, and you can see just the eastern, almost 40% or a little bit more, is actually a target for oil and gas. It's in the greater Wattenberg area, so it's very ripe for drilling. This is data from the COGCC. This is data 10, October 7th of last year. It shows the actual number of wells that are active per county. I live in Weld County, or Well County. There's 17,388 at that time. Now there's closer to 18,000 that are active. Garfield County follows in second with a little bit over 9,000 at this time, followed by Yuma, La Plata, Las Animas, Rio Blanco, and 36 other counties. So there are a total of 41 counties that I know of that are being fracked at this time. This is a density well map, mainly of Weld County, a little bit of Boulder County, and then the northwest portion is Larimer County. Each dot represents an active oil and gas well pad that can have up to 52 active oil and gas wells per well pad. So you're looking at roughly 18,000 oil and gas wells right here. And I live in the middle of this red stuff, right in here somewhere. This is what a township looks like. You can see the density sort of close up and proximity to each other. Each one of these townships is just riddled with oil and gas wells. Now I would like to say that in the state of Colorado, there are 129,073 wells of all statuses, but only around 47,000 of those are active. This is another map of Weld County showing the influx or the introduction. It appears to show an introduction into Larimer County. All the yellow areas here are indicative. They're designed or designated as oil and gas exploratory units. So Larimer County is a little bit nervous right now because they can see what's just east of them. This is not really a scientific modeling map, but it's a prediction map that illustrates 100,000 wells in Colorado. The industry states, and we've heard secondary talk that Colorado may have within the next 2 or 3 decades 100,000 active oil and gas wells. So anything that was a low formation, and Wes Wilson talks about this at great length, is a target for oil and gas, with the exception of the mountains, of course. This is the greater Wattenberg field. In this area, they're actually targeting the J Sands area, so they're going to be drilling down to about 7,000, 8,000 feet. You may have seen this just recently. This was right across from this Chevrolet shop on Highway 119. This was a ruptured wellhead. This is what it should say, actually. The press called it Colorado 119 reopens east of Longmont after gas leak near Longview Estates. But we think in reality it appears that it was a ruptured wellhead which closed Highway 19 and businesses were evacuated. Just a little difference in opinion there. This is Longmont. You can see the greater Wattenberg area as delineated with the black line around it. So you're right in here. And again, this is the really, really ripe area for oil and gas development. Sort of a close-up of your sections. And you can see the sections are roughly estimated to be, I believe it's net worth of $1 billion per section. Wes Wilson talks about this as well. So when you look at the actual county assessment for Longmont, it's around $10 billion. The value of oil and gas is roughly 3 times that, or close to that. So there's a big interest to develop. I'm sure a lot of you have seen these. These are the derricks. I'm just going to take you through some real quick basics and then jump into some other things. The derrick obviously is this vertical structure. It's usually about 150 feet up in the air. That's where they insert the piping down into the ground, the subsurface, to target that formation. Then normally the round containers would hold chemicals, but I will elaborate on that in a second. This is a satellite image of a well pad just north of where I live, Firestone. This is in Weld County. These red and blue containers are actually water storage containers. They're about 50 feet long each, and we counted them. There are 165 of them on this pad. They each hold roughly 20,000 gallons of water. Mind you, it's normally municipal or fresh water. So this frac job would consist of roughly 3.3 million gallons of water used. This just gives you kind of a ground level view of these water storage tanks. This is in Firestone, right next to Coleridge Middle School, and then a King Soopers is right behind here. There are some wellheads here that are being protected by these cement barriers until they can build a fence in, but you can see a derrick off in the background as well. These are the trucks that force the waters and chemicals and the proppants at extremely high pressures down into the ground to sort of refracture that shale formation to open it up so it can release the natural gas and or the oil, whatever their target mineral is. It's kind of a very complex system. Just a simple schematic of a completed area where you're going to see a number of wellheads that are back here. But I'll go through this real quickly. These things right here, a lot of people confuse these as water tanks for agriculture and a lot of other things. These are for oil and gas. It's a condensate tank. They do hold product. It's called a tank battery. Normally there's more than one, so it's a battery of tanks. And then you can see just off the top of that, there's a line going down. It goes down into a produced water tank, and that's where the produced water is actually stored until it's retrieved by trucks to then dispose of. We've got a separator here. This actually heats up the product, removes sort of the lighter liquids from the actual product. There's an actuator valve on here that releases roughly 6 cubic feet per minute of hydrocarbon vapors or methane. What this does is it controls the system. When you initially frack, you have unstable pressures, and those hiccups in the system are being released through that actuator. And according to Encana just a few days ago, the release actuator valve is 6 cubic feet per minute, and on a new well, that can happen roughly every 5 minutes, 24 hours a day. And then it slowly declines as the actual well regains and stabilizes its pressure. A lot of the hydrocarbon vapors are then burned off in volatile organic combustor stacks. Here's a small one, it's very common, but you see the larger ones. Those are usually indicative of a number of wellheads on site. So they're going to have more of a VOC quantity to burn off. Inside here is a pilot light. It's to contain the flame. If the flame were out in the open, it'd be extremely hazardous. As you'll see by all the dozen signs around here, no open flame. What this does is it burns off excess hydrocarbon vapors. And so on a cool day, you might see a heat signature coming from this VOC stack, but there are a couple of them here. This right here in the blue, this is a berm. A berm is there to protect any type of fluid loss within this pad area from migrating elsewhere. Normally it's supposed to hold 110 to 150% of the actual fluid loss that would be on site. This is in Firestone, and you can see the close proximity to residential homes here. This one mapped out at roughly 118 feet from the neighbor's back sliding glass door. Again, this is a condensate tank. It holds roughly 16,000 gallons of product, and then the produced water tank goes down in the bottom here. What I've found is this area in Firestone was zoned industrial first, and then somehow the city approved residential dwelling development in close proximity to these wells. You know, the state has certain setbacks, COGCC, if they're going to drill a well next to a home In an urban area, it's usually 350 feet away from the residence. But in this case, it was in reverse, as I understand it. The well was drilled first, and then the homes were developed later. So I urge all of you to really talk to your city to see what type of mitigations and what type of more responsible setbacks could be had when you're creating residential areas in and amongst oil and gas development that already exists. This is a sort of a multi-well pad. It's an aggregation. The industry purports that it's more efficient and more effective for them. It is. I have pros and cons with this because the pros of this is that you're not taking, for example, there are 7 or 8, there are actually 8 well bores on this site, as I can see. Instead of clearing out 8 football field sections and drilling as you would conventionally with vertical drilling all over the place, now they can maximize them and put them on a single pad. So you're not going to have that scarring of the land all over the place. You have one concentrated area. The con with this is that you have an aggregation of pollution. You have, per condensate tank, per Encana, 2 tons of volatile organic hydrocarbon vapors are released from each tank battery every year, to include your 6 CFM from the separators and to also include your volatile organic combustor stacks. So I think it should be considered a major source pollution rather than a minor source pollution. This is another area that needs to be stressed very heavily. So we've got 2 tons of hydrocarbon vapors being released from the condensate tanks. Obviously, it's simple math. That's 16 tons of hydrocarbon vapors per year from this pad. Just imagine if you were living downstream a little bit. Fugitive emissions, what are they? They include hydrocarbon gases released from leaks and from evaporation of volatile organic compounds from open pits. VOCs such as benzene, ethylbenzene, cyclopentane, and dozens of others are released chemicals. They do pose a long-term health risk to workers in local communities. And keep in mind, you live in a city. If they're going to frack in the city, do know that the industry is exempt from the Clean Air Act. If methane emissions are contained in a building, obviously there is a risk of explosion, and I have a case that shows an example of that in a little bit here. This is a video of hydrocarbon vapors that are being released. Joe, it's actually right here. Go ahead and just click on the video itself, right there. This is from a helicopter. It's taken from Barnett Shale. You can see the tank batteries here. This is viewing it from an infrared camera. You can see the hydrocarbon vapor and signature heat release as well. Okay, those are hydrocarbon vapors that are being released from the condensate tanks, as I mentioned. They happen everywhere. Everywhere there is a condensate tank. According to Encana, again, that roughly 2 tons of hydrocarbon vapors are released annually per tank. This is a study done by NOAA that was just recently compiled. I believe it was a week or 2 ago. This was done in Erie, Colorado, just down the road. They have about 19,000 people, population. And what they did was, NOAA has a tower there, an air quality or air chemistry monitoring tower there, and they juxtaposed the propane levels with Pasadena, California, and Houston, Texas. And you can see right here in this top yellow arrow that the black is Erie. The red is Houston, Texas, and the green is Pasadena, California. So the propane levels, parts per billion, according to NOAA, are significantly elevated above those two comparative cities, directly linked from oil and gas development, per NOAA. The second one down here is the ethene. This, again, was juxtaposed or paralleled with Pasadena, California, and Houston, Texas, and it shows the parts per billion that are identical to both Houston, Texas, and Pasadena, California. Once again, NOAA indicates that these are directly related to oil and gas development. Fugitive emissions, again, I mean, this is really important because they're exempt from the Clean Air Act, and these happen everywhere. This is a children's playground in the background. This is in Firestone, Colorado. You can see the VOC stacks, the volatile organic combustor flares. Again, the flame is contained on the inside, so you're not going to see the flame shooting at the top. They are in close proximity to our public access areas where our children play. Here's a satellite image of the same area. The prior image I showed you is right here. Here's the playground. Here's an active oil and gas production area. Here's the elementary school. And here's another oil and gas well. So they're kind of sandwiched in between oil and gas, this elementary school and this playground. This one is not really surprising, but I think it is. Historically, this image was taken in 1999. It's a satellite image, and I want to bring to your attention this text right here. This is Thomas Reservoir right here. This is in Erie, Colorado. And then, of course, these are the streets. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward in time. This is 1999. And you can see residential development around this once active oil and gas location, this well right here. It's listed as plugged and abandoned during this residential development. Now you can see this homeowner may or may not know, I don't know, it's in great proximity, close proximity to the residents. I bring this up for a number of reasons. One, do you understand that there are a number of abandoned oil and gas wells in your city, in almost every city? Is the city aware of them? I recently gave a presentation in another city and they were shocked. They didn't know. And so they're kind of scrambling to try to figure out what they can do. So my advice again is that your city should locate these and not allow residential development in close proximity to these abandoned wells. It's very important not to. And then this is 2011. So you can see that this is still here. The reason why I bring that up is because this is a case, January 13th, 2011, in Florence, Colorado. The Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission requested emergency funding for explosive levels of methane seeping into occupied residential homes from plugged and abandoned wells. You can see the location is right here. This is in Florence. You can see on this map over here, all the orange dots appear to be abandoned oil and gas wells. So there are a number of homes, as I understand it, in the reports that I've read, that are being affected by this. So that's my concern. All cities, so far that I've seen, have a number of abandoned wells. There are roughly 90,000 abandoned wells in the entire state. The question is, where are they? Produced water. Produced water, everybody hears about this, but what is it really? It's the water that is produced during the fracking operations. It's classified as an industrial waste. It's exempt from the Safe Drinking Water Act and the Clean Water Act. It's industrial waste that contains highly toxic or carcinogenic or even radioactive materials, normally occurring radioactive materials, to include benzene, xylene, toluene, ethylbenzene, naturally occurring radioactive materials, and other chemicals. This is the produced water tank, as I mentioned. It's roughly 3,000 gallons. It's flowed off of the condensate tank, and then trucks will come in and pump it out, and then take it to a Class 2 injection well. Class 2 injection well, I'll show you in a little bit. Basically, it's a disposal area that's designed for this water. The water that's used, and Mr. Doe is going to be talking about that, is used to extinction. This water cannot be reused for municipal purposes, so they have to take this water, this produced water, to a disposal site, usually somewhere, and deep well inject it forever. It's never returned back to the hydrological cycle again. This is a recent study that I did. It was reviewed just 2 days ago, and there'll be some more information on this. Basically what it is I studied 1,000 spill release reports done and operated by the COGCC in regards to oil and gas. So 1,000 oil and gas spills I studied, and what I concluded was that 42.7% of those appear to result in groundwater contamination. That's documented. That's a Form 19, it's a spill release report that the COGCC mandates that the operators fill out once there's a surface spill. So 42.7% appear to result in groundwater contamination out of the 1,000 spill reports. This is in Weld County. 3.1% appear to result in surface water contamination, and 57.1% of those spills appear to have berm failures. Remember, the berm is designed to prevent the secondary migration of these lost fluids on site. So here's an example of a spill. This is in Arapahoe County in December 2005, I believe. This is one that really shocked me when I saw it for a number of reasons. One is that this is an open evaporation pit in Arapahoe County. And they had a spill release report that they filled out, and they had lost 210,000 gallons of produced water. Apparently the berm breached, and 210,000 gallons of this industrial waste drained into Cottonwood Creek, right down here. 0 of those 210,000 gallons were recovered. Who are the recipients of Cottonwood Creek? Maybe it's dry, but it does receive snow melts and stormwater runoff as well. So that's one concern too, is that there are a lot of spills that most of the fluids or partial fluids are just never recovered again. Here's another spill. This is an oil spill. This is in Weld County again. This is actually at a disposal facility site for oil and gas. 2,100 gallons were spilled. 421 of those gallons, or 420 gallons, was not recovered. So you have 421 gallons of this benzene product that has not been recovered. And the groundwater was 3 to 4 feet in depth. So here they are here. On the report, it states that the spill was contained within a berm. But to me, it looks like they grabbed some shovels real quickly and made a berm around the spill. And that's exactly what they did. Good for them. I'm glad they did it. It's a little late, though. All right, so this is something that was very curious to me as well. This is a satellite image in Weld County indicating a number of well pad sites which appear to me show vegetation loss in certain areas or any type of degradation of the surface vegetation. To me, that would be indicative of a surface spill with any type of chemicals that would essentially void the vegetation or kill it. Now, I did some research on this. Noble Energy operates these areas, and I did some deep research to find out if they had any spill release reports associated with these precise locations. There are none. One of the other questions is, with the 90,000 historic wells, are they a problem? And how could they be a problem? This is in Weld County. This is Mr. Anderson, the case of Mr. Anderson's water well in the Laramie Fox Hills Aquifer. August 1st, 2009, Mr. Anderson filed a complaint with the state alleging an impact to his water well was caused from mining or any of the pipes that were underground. He wasn't sure, so he actually called the investigator, the inspectors, to come out and check it out. The state tested Mr. Anderson's water and found it had been impacted from mining operation with thermogenic methane and toluene, highly carcinogenic. The state issued a notice of alleged violation to the oil and gas operator. It was determined that the well bore had a hole in the production casing. The state determined that the oil and gas operator caused contamination of the Laramie Fox Hills Aquifer and Mr. Anderson's water well from the hole, thus contaminating groundwater. These reports can be found on the COGCC's website. The order number is 1V as in Victor, -349. The state issued fines of $66,000, later reduced to $46,200. The oil and gas well was then immediately plugged and abandoned by the oil and gas operator. Here's Mr. Anderson's residence right here, and roughly 1,000 feet was the oil and gas operation. So you can see 1,000 feet of possible migration. It's quite a ways. This is from my buddy Phil right up here in the front. What is the real cost of water? He said this at one of our presentations, and I quickly jotted it down. He says, "I'm simply amazed that we are using our most precious natural resource, water, to mine for something far less valuable." Couldn't be farther from the truth. Where does all the potentially toxic produced water go? As I mentioned, Class 2 injection wells. These are large open formations underground that the oil and gas industry pumps produced water or industrial fracking wastewater down into where it remains forever. Waste injection site has been found in Colorado to have the capacity of roughly 1.3 trillion gallons. That's a lot of industrial waste, liquid. Rumors say they can pump it into streams, rivers, lakes, and open bodies of water. Generally, that's probably from coal bed methane extraction. The water is much, much cleaner. Not as many chemicals that are being used in that extraction. Some of the other areas that we are told by people who work in the industry for 20 or 30 years that they can use it for agriculture, crops, and livestock. Or recently spraying on dirt roads or out in the fields for dust mitigation. Keep in mind, there are some great operators. There are some great ones that have great ethics, great morals, but then you have the other side as well. And I'll show you. My suspicion was when I was speaking to an operator that worked out in the field, stating that if they didn't have to get a permit, they just didn't. They would just dump the produced water on the surface. That caught my attention immediately, and so I started doing a little bit of investigation. These areas are active oil and gas well pads, and you can see a void of vegetation that goes out into the field. I did show these images to a person that worked in the industry for 20 or 30 years, and he stated that that looks exactly like what would happen when they open up the valves in the produced water trucks and just drive. Here are a couple others that I found. Close proximity to a riparian area or an active body of water or seasonally active body of water. You can see in the red these sterile areas where there is no vegetation. Again, this is in Weld County, just north of Keensburg, about 5 miles. Here's a couple others, which are shocking. It's a well pad here, and it's just quite easy to drive out in the field with your valves open. Not saying they did it, I can't prove it. However, it appears that this would be the case. And this area speaks for itself. It's kind of a mess. Lots of void of vegetation, big striations where vegetation is completely lost. And here are the active oil and gas well sites. Okay, so the other impact is revegetation or reclamation. What's being done? I'm seeing that there's a huge trend, at least in the past, that you're going to see all these well pad sites. Again, this is in Weld County, just right next door to you. And I just put some circles around most of them so you can see where these areas are. A lot of these are not active, they're plugged and abandoned. So the reclamation, the remediation appears to not have been successful. Here's just another satellite image. You can see the green ones are actually active oil and gas wells. The red ones are not active. So you can see these areas where they're void of vegetation. They need to revegetate that the way it was prior to drilling or better. That's what the industry should do. I'm almost done here. I've got a couple more slides. Abandoned oil and gas wells, how many are there, and are they at risk? As I mentioned earlier, there are 47,000 approximately that are active oil and gas wells. There are 129,073 in the entire state. 47,000 approximately are active, and that leaves roughly 90,000 that are abandoned historic wells, and many of those are awaiting re-entry. My concerns are many, but one is these historic wells date back 20, 30 years. The natural integrity of the cement has been compromised throughout time and previous operations. Now they're coming in with new technologies and extreme high pressures. Is there a liability using a 30 or 40-year-old cement wellbore? I think so. One of the biggest impacts, I think, is it's a human error by the COGCC. They only have 17 inspectors in the entire state. Last year they had 15. Now they have 17. So you have 47,000 active oil and gas wells and 90,000 inactive. How many of those are each inspector going to inspect? So let's just look at the 47,000 right here. That equals 2,760 well inspections per year per inspector for the active ones, the 47,000. Now, the inactive ones have to be inspected once per year. So that would equate to 5,294 inspections per inspector for just the abandoned wells. Now we add those up, and we have 8,058 inspections for each one of those 17 inspectors per year. It's physically impossible. Physically impossible. They just can't do it. So to me, that's a huge liability on the state to not be able to mitigate spills and any other types of adverse environmental and human health impacts. Is this a failure?